So moving ahead, we need to deal with Harmony in red. In his Paris studio, with its window looking out over a monastery garden in 1908, Matisse created one of his most important works of the period, the Red Room, or Harmony in Red. The artist himself called this a decorative panel, and it was intended for a dining room in a Moscow mansion. Now, Matisse turned to a motif that was common in the works created that year, a room decorated with vases, fruit, and flowers, but he does something a little bit different. As he wrote in 1908, the basis of my thinking has not changed, but the very thinking has evolved. My means of expression have followed on. So in other words, he's having the thoughts to move ahead, and now finally he believes that his technique, his abilities, are pursuing those same directions. Now he's looking for a certain flatness in the painting, in this case, a flatness of the red color. And the artist managed to create this within the impression of space within which the female figure bending over the vase could move and within which the sharp angles of the chair seem natural. So we have a space that doesn't seem natural, but yet at the same time does. We have this very flattened space. The red is always consistent, always the same. The decorative elements are really very consistent, very much the same. And add to that the window through which we see this green garden. But it may or may not actually be a window. It could be a painting on the wall. There's no way for us to know what it is. We're just drawn to it because it is that very cool tone exterior space compared to this interior space with this bright red that almost pushes us out of the space itself, makes us a little uncomfortable. Now, let's compare this to some of his ideas in The Dinner Table, which he paints about 10 years earlier. Very similar sort of composition. We have the window, we have the woman setting up the centerpiece, we've got the table at the center. Even some of the dishware is very similar, and yet we see something very, very different. He has simplified and flattened the forms. The window is not a window. It's this questionable element that we can't quite wrap our heads around. We see a maturation of Matisse's use of color. Instead of doing what everyone else has done, this very naturalistic use of color that you see on the left, he's suddenly using color on the right in a very unnatural way. He's breaking it down and simplifying those colors. So an orange is not tones of orange, it is simply orange. We see a use of rich, intense colors. Now the painting was originally done in green and then repainted in blue before being finally painted in red. And it is said that this red is what really drew a lot of people to it. Now, when we look at it, there are a few things that are throwing you off. And I'm going to have to change my pen color, and I apologize for this, but I usually use red, and that's not going to work here, obviously. So when we look at, we've dealt with the window, and whether this is a window or some kind of picture. But then we need to deal with the decorations in the background. The use of these Art Nouveau decorative schemes, these plant-based decorative schemes, are identical to the ones used on the tablecloth. Now we know it's a tablecloth because we have her standing behind it. So we have this area of implied line that tells us there must be some separation. But by using the same pattern, it flattens the whole thing. The only way we know that this is a flat surface is that the pattern on the tablecloth bends around at a 90-degree angle. So it tells us it's a flat surface, even though we don't have the usual detail of a slightly different color on the sides than we would have on the back or on the top. So it's a very intriguing piece. And to give you some idea of how difficult this is, here is an attempt at an actual model of the piece. And you see the difference. So at the top, what we have is the actual painting. and on the bottom, a model recreating it. And you can see we can't quite make out if this is a framed image or a window. We see the chairs in the same position, but we see them strangely different, strangely flattened. And we get that sense of the tablecloth, almost like this tablecloth cannot actually exist in nature. Just look at what happens here. Look at the different tones of red, where we have a bright red here in the top of the table, but then we have sort of a medium red in the background, a very dark red for the side of the table. These details don't exist in the original piece. So he's flattening those surfaces. He's divorcing color from reality. He's trying to get across something very different. What he's trying to do is give us this space that is really a decorative space. Something different than anything we've seen up to this point.